Welcome to another episode of Vulgarian Recommends. Today we will discuss Conan the Destroyer from 1984, directed by Richard Fleischer. So this is the sequel to Conan the Barbarian, which we talked about last year in a podcast. I think it was back in May last year or something like that. And then we, for some reason, kind of got addicted to Conan. And since then, we've always kind of referred to each other with like Conan-related names. Like I always call Altes Subotai or Subotas, and he calls me Chrome, which is the god of Conan. Yeah, so that's kind of why we are also doing the sequel now, and we might do the remake at some point, and then Red Sonja, which is kind of similar film, but we'll see about that. But this sequel, it starts with Conan and Malak, or Malek, I don't remember which way it was, but they are in this field kind of praying to this kind of in this altar, and then there's this evil queen who sends her henchmen to attack Conan and Malek, and because she wants to recruit Conan to escort her niece, the princess, on a quest. And then on that quest, there is lots of magic and fighting and comedy and stuff like that. And it kind of falls a bit flat, and it isn't as good as the original, but it's still a fun movie. And I don't necessarily get why people like sometimes absolutely hate this one, because yeah, it's not as good as the original, but it's still like a fun fantasy movie overall, I think. Yeah. But I think that's enough of an introduction. It's gonna be probably fun to talk about this, although I'm not sure how much we will have to talk about it.
Yeah, it was nice to watch this one. As we were discussing even before starting shooting this, I think the first one is quite epic in the sense of, because it's the origin story, because there's certain characters like you said, Subotai, and just the events, and then obviously you have James Earl Jones, playing the antagonist, and so the whole thing in scale felt larger. Yeah, in Conan the Barbarian, and this one is more like, it's fun, but it's like you said, the setup is very all fairy tales you sort of know, right? There's the kind of the evil queen, and she may have certain objectives, and then you have this kind of innocent princess who's just coming into adolescence, or coming into her knowledge of the world, and then Conan the Barbarian, the unlikely guide that's gonna help her on this journey. So of course we've seen that set up many times, but like you said, yeah, it is overall fun to kind of go with it. And as I was saying, like, I was planning to watch Conan the Barbarian again before watching this, was I was kind of glad that I didn't, because uh, it's just to kind of say, okay, another adventure of Conan, and this is another adventure, but there are lots of fun moments, and it's still entertaining to watch Arnold in that character, and also wonder why we didn't get a third uh, outing as well.
Yeah. So the characters here are definitely weaker than in the first one. I especially hate the character Malak, and
Yeah,
because he feels like he's been transported from like a random toy store in America to this movie or something, like working at Walmart, and now he's suddenly in Conan universe. Yeah, he was just so horrible.
oh man.
Obviously, he's meant to be that kind of core Chester type. Even they even make him the Chester in the end, but although we shouldn't spoil it yet. But yeah.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. That character's same for me. I was like, yeah, it's Subotai, and then it was such a drop from what Subotai was as a sidekick, and then it's almost like the idea was to play Malik as an almost ironic character. Like, he's supposed to be this, bit of a simple uh, dummy who's just like basically the same as Don Quixote's sidekick, right? Essentially, that was the whole idea, that he's kind of that sort of character, that he provides the comedic relief and he's simplistic and all that. But at the same time, I think he didn't show any uh, many merits. He was just always the guy who's like, well, I'm not going to put myself at risk. And then there's a running gag related to that, uh, which I realize we're not in the spoilers part, so maybe I won't go into that gag.
Yeah, but he reminded me of like why I used to hate comedies when I was younger, because I hated that, or like Jim Carrey and all that, those types of comedy actors, and this is like a B version of that. So, and he has such a kind of punchable face and stuff. And yeah, he's just so annoying. And I think they were
He
actually
was
supposed to
working at
cast
Walmart.
something else. Yeah, they were supposed to cast someone else, but then I don't remember who it was, but then that person was like sick or something, so he couldn't do this film. So then they went with this actor.
Yeah, exactly. I think there was this magic in Conan the Barbarian between Conan and Subutai, in the sense that you could you could see how Conan cares for his friend Subutai, like why they become friends, how they kind of work as a team, and then there's this mutual respect, and you could see how Conan cares. But here it really seemed like you had this question, like, why is Conan bringing this guy along? Because he just needs someone else, like, to go along with, because he's totally unnecessary by the way he's being played. But you could see that it's meant to add something to the flavor. It's supposed to create some interaction and like further humorous moments and all that. And but yeah, the performance is just um, yeah, it's terrible. Like you said, like I love that he was just working at a store the next day before they just brought him on set, and really it felt like that. It really felt like that.
Yeah, but at least the legendary basketball player Will Chamberlain is really good in this film. I kind of like his character, even though obviously he's not a good actor. I think this is like his only like proper film role or something.
Bata. Well, yeah, they totally just brought him in for the name, like everyone's curiosity, and his physicality, right? Him being a certain size, that yeah, that's true. Like it added something to it, but yeah,
Yeah.
he's like that the whole movie, like just wherever he's supposed to protect her. Yeah. But yeah, he was still okay. Like he was still okay. Like you had to give it to him. You're like, all right, it's Will Chamberlain. He's trying to do his best. Um, but Grace Jones, I mean, I thought Grace Jones was good because she herself is liked being a bit out there and mad in her uh, kind of in her art as well, and in the artwork for her albums and all that kind of stuff. That there's that image, so she really brought that. She really tried to bring that energy, that almost volatile energy and stuff. So she really like got into her role. I think she's obviously not the greatest actress, but she was really committed, I thought, to what she was doing, and I think seemed like she was having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, and I think even Roger Ebert mentioned that she is the best part of the
Yeah.
movie, like a rock star or something, like either in her role, because it's so over the top and kind of charismatic. Has that kind of feminine power.
Yeah, you could almost imagine a spin-off with just that character. Yeah. And what they could get up to.
And Roger Ebert gave this like 3 out of 4. He really enjoyed this film.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he even mentioned that this is better than the first one. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like I was just reading on Wikipedia, like there was some quotes from him or something.
okay, I'm gonna read that because obviously I'm a fan of Roger Ebert's, and um, yeah, if it wasn't for Roger Ebert, I probably wouldn't have discovered different kinds of cinema. Like one of my things on the weekend was to watch the review channel, and then um, as it was around as I was getting older, then I'd get interested in some of the more independent and even sometimes foreign films, like you would mention, and so that's how I ended up seeing like Pan's Labyrinth. So yeah, I think yeah. So I'd be interested. I'm interested to see for what are his reasonings why this is better than the other one. But if you were to make an argument that this one's better than the other one, what would you focus on and say that this is the reason this is better than this could be seen as better than the first one?
No, I mean, I think it would come down to this being more fun and more
Mm.
action packed and more kind of faster paced, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
I
mean,
think
that's
so
the
too.
only
Like,
thing where this could be better. But again, I'm not sure if it's better even in that way.
yeah, yeah. So definitely, I think the runtime, which may have been due to budget, who knows? But I thought that's a good. The runtime was good. So while the film was feeling not the same as the first one, I thought the running time kept it on course. So you continue on with the journey. So I thought that yeah, I thought that runtime was great. And I think overall that I think the plot itself is a fun plot. Uh, so it kept me going because I thought it was a fun, interesting plot. I just think there are like elements that just seem to fall flat. Like the like key things were made it's almost like they were making fun of themselves a bit too much. Like with the character, for example, Akiro, the wizard. So that was another character I just like I really disliked because not by the way it was being played, but their choices in making this wizard very hammy, right? It's down there, right? Like that to me, I was like, why not just up the just make him like don't make him a completely hammy wizard, right? Like just a ridiculous wizard where you get to the point where you're like, okay, I don't take him seriously as a wizard. So I get it was to make fun of the whole wizard and magic versus magic, and for it to be a little bit self-referential, and maybe that's what Ebert may have liked about it as well. Roger Ebert is the fact that it is aware of itself. It is kind of making fun of the tropes, but then I felt like they went so far that it would be ridiculous. Like the wizard added like almost near nothing to the film.
Yeah. But I think we could now go into the spoiler section because we've talked about the spoilers kind of already. But yeah, the wizards, like there's that wizards kind of battle in here as when they are trying to escape, and there's that mouth of the thing, and they are trying to use the power to open it or close it.
Yeah,
But the fight scenes before that are pretty thrilling because so many people like fighting.
yeah, and oh man, there, yeah, and yeah, let's go into that. So what does Conan say uh, in the beginning? He's like when he's asked to go on this journey, and he's like, "No way!" Essentially, I'm not gonna go on this, and they're like, "Why not?" And he's like, "A sword versus wizardry. There's no point." So it's like the whole thing is yeah. So I think yeah. So let's kind of go on it. What's interesting about the film is probably the I felt like the journey is actually not Conan's. The journey is Princess Jenna's, right? So I thought that part is kind of cool because it's like Conan is someone who is going to be a protector and a guide for Princess Jenna, very much like the Hidden Fortress, right? That this is not about Conan, but this is something Conan finds himself in. But what he finds himself in is bigger than himself, and his particular uh, values and character and persona and sensibilities are what exactly what that princess needs to go on her journey, right? Because she has a protector in Bombata, but we already know that Bombata, and it's kind of a funny name. Like, see, this is the thing. There's a lot of like s- strange choices. Not strange choices, but Bombada was funny because I was like, okay, it sounds so similar to Bambada, like Africa Bambada. So I'm like, are they just trying to be like this? He's a soul for at that time, not to mean it in an offensive way, but like soul brother protector kind of thing. Like, uh, so there are these choices that are very much of the time. That is Wilt Chamberlain, so we make the name Bombada. So that's kind of interesting. And obviously, Grace Jones is very tribal as Zulu, but and a very on the nose Zulu, like literally she's from the Zulu tribe. But um, yeah, so that this is the kind of journey. So it's more like it's a flip on this princess fairy tale journey story that you would tell like young children and young girls. But it's like now it's in the Conan universe. So I thought that part's interesting.
Yeah, and just like you said, it kind of feels like it's not Conan's story, and kind of in the end, we get more of that as well when Conan says that, yeah, I want my own kingdom and stuff. So here I was just a side character. This is a side quest, but I need my own kingdom.
Yeah, and he's very loyal. He's like, no, never. Only one queen for me,
Valeria.
Valeria.
That's such a generic, like fantasy story name as well, like Valeria. Isn't that even Game of Thrones has like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, Valeria.
Valeria, like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think that part is. So I can see that. Like, I liked that aspect of it, that he's finding himself in this sort of fairy tale story. It's almost like uh, cross universe things going on, right? Like there was the Conan, very nihilistic, very almost dark, brutal world, and is crossing universes with stories that exist in the same kind of time period, like fairy tales. And then it's like, let's bring them together. So I think that general setup, I enjoyed that till the very end. I did enjoy seeing him in that world and how he's going to behave in that world. Uh, but I think it felt like there were opportunities lost. Like that could have been enhanced as well.
And one thing I was thinking about when I was watching this, it felt like maybe the Conan universe has been inspired by like the King Arthur
Mm.
myths and stuff. Like, for example, the room with the mirrors. It really
Oh yeah,
reminded me of like the Crystal Cave in like the King Arthur stories and stuff. So, but of course, like King Arthur has like inspired pretty much all fantasy after it. So, but yeah, it felt like that. And like in general, I really love the Conan world. I think there would have been lots of potential for like many
yeah,
sequels if you just had like talented people
yeah,
working on them. And this morning I was even like browsing in like online bookstores some of the Conan comics and the books and stuff. So that might be fun to get into in the future because those are probably way better than these films.
yeah, yeah. I absolutely think you're right, because yeah, the world is very interesting even from the first one. It's that it's captivating, and it's in a obviously it's enjoyable. Uh, you kind of like seeing that kind of landscape, that Even Conan himself, like, is a very interesting uh, character. And like you said, that yeah, the potential was there, because even with this movie, watching it and feeling a bit flat on it, immediately I was like, oh, I would love to, why wasn't there a third one? Like, immediately I was like, I would still continue going on despite all that. And this particular one, unfortunately, it seems like, because of what it was and it not working, it pulled the franchise down, whereas it started on this high, and this was highly anticipated. Uh, and one of the elements that I feel also contributed to it is that, like what we were talking about, the hokiness of some key uh, like moments. So that like you said, the Crystal Palace, the Wall of Mirrors. Like, I think that sequence, it's like you're supposed to feel quite a bit in that sequence in terms of like engagement. And I think the way it ultimately resolved itself, and even the thread itself, was just not interesting enough. And the way the and I don't know if it was lack of budget, or just because of that affecting the effects and what they could actually do with that scene. But I thought, that's that scene that takes you into that fairy tale world, and then really can take you, fully engross you in what is going on. And I felt like that felt like such a lost opportunity by the way they ended up executing it.
Yeah, this feels kind of rushed as well. That maybe they needed a bit more kind of backstory and mythology for all these magic
Yeah,
and the wizards, like we have in Lord of the Rings, for example. We know what the ring is and what it does to people, and there's lots of backstory on that. And then also like morals and ethics come to play. But here it's just, yeah, let's rush through this fast, fun action plot, and let's not like really build on, or let's not do any world building probably, because this is such a fascinating world, and like I said, there's lots of potential. So it would be nice to get a bit more of that kind of mythological element there as well, and not just full on action.
yeah, 100%. I think that first one, John Milius and Oliver Stone writing the screenplay together, there are all these additional aspects, right? Like, even thematically, that get woven in. Plus, like you said, the world was built very clearly. You knew, you know, what his initial journey is about, how he ended up in this current circumstance, all what he's trying to do, what's going on the other side, in terms of this, like, whatever, snake cult. And here, that's exactly how I felt. I felt the same as you. I was like, this could be very interesting, but I don't know enough about this world with the queen and the princess and how they find themselves. It was very like one layer that, oh, of course, you take it for granted. This is the evil queen, and she, she just wants this power. But I think you're right that not much was explained why that thing exists, and then they would just throw it away at the end of it, like when the castle is like sinking, and Akira goes, ah, it was all illusion. It's almost like we're gonna take this part from Wizard of Oz, and you know echo it or quote it for the audience because they know it, and then they know what it is, and this is kind of like Wizard of Oz, and let's move on to the next plot point. I think that's where the movie feels flat, because you just don't get invested enough, knowing enough about it.
Yeah. What else there? What else is there? Like I think that again, like I mentioned, the Red Sonja film that came out a year later than this. It's also very similar to this in the way that again Conan is the kind of the second character, and they were meant to call him Conan in that film, I think, but then I think there were some issues there, so then they changed his name to Kalidor or something like that. But he's basically the Conan character, but um but with a different name, and there he's also helping a woman on her quest. So they kind of almost like remade this movie with a different name a year later. Yeah,
Yeah, and there's this, even in this film, there's this uh wherever he goes, it's like, I've heard of you. They would say, Conan, yeah, I've heard of you. And again, like you said, that if you're kind of jumping universes, maybe it's more interesting that they don't know who he is, right? Like, who is this guy? He's like kind of a force that is outside of their right. He's not one for this fairy tale, this kind of fairy tale world, but he happens to be the exact right guy because he is bringing a kind of aspect of reality or realpolitik or however we want to describe it, uh, that this world needs because everyone is a bit Pollyannish, like, and because that is meant to reflect the perception of that girl. She's being guided by this intuition, um, but she doesn't know enough about the world, and she needs to learn something about it. So, in some ways, like I did applaud the fact that there was this focus on um, kind of female like teen adolescence, but not in the usual tropes we see as, because they bring in all these aspects of her starting to become aware of her sexuality and stuff like that too in there. So in some ways, I was like, okay, it's kind of uh, I like that it is bringing these things even to the point where at points you feel a bit uncomfortable, right? Because here's this clearly very teenage girl, and then they're showing like her attraction to Conan, and right, and even sexual attraction to Conan, and even trying to, in some ways, come on to him. That makes it a very uncomfortable situation, but at the same time, it was like honest too. That what do you expect? They show that always with kind of teenage boys, starting to learn of their sexuality, but there we always shy away from that aspect with girls, and we try to make it into a very comfortable. So I thought that part was, I was like, okay, makes you a bit uncomfortable, but it also I kind of applaud it because it's trying to broach a topic we feel uncomfortable about.
Yeah, and I guess it feels a bit ahead of its time with that
Yeah,
too. Especially 80s was quite a conservative decade with Reagan and stuff. So it feels like this kind of went against the grain and yeah, did something a bit more liberal, and I guess you could even say feminist in a way. How it shows that again, women also have sexuality and they aren't just like only about like having children and stuff. And then obviously there some of the women characters are very strong here as well. Like Zulu is very
yeah,
strong. Although with that character, maybe you could argue that it has like cultural appropriation or something, a little bit like in terms of like modern standards now, but back in the day, it wasn't something that people thought about that much.
yeah. And I'm glad you brought up Zulu because I that is definitely one of the really interesting things about the film, that Zulu itself, because like you said, there's always the question of stereotyping and appropriation, but then at the same time with Grace Jones doing it, and Grace Jones having the elements of that in her own art, I felt like this is not some, and what Grace Jones did with it, it felt like this was not imposed on her, or maybe if it was written with that kind of narrower mindset, she made it so it was hers. So she played it, and she took the role in an empowered way, and her, in a way, like I felt like her fearlessness with it, like to truly embody, okay, I am that, from this warrior tribe, and I am not going to play it in a way that will make uh, audiences feel safer. I mean, this is where all going into a very complex territory, when it comes to such depictions. But I felt like what she did with it showed how empowered she felt in herself, even the way she dressed and the way she was moving, but even when she was, in her action sequences and all that stuff. So I thought that's like one of the it's truly one of the highlights of the film, and why it's also very worth seeing, because I think that aspect that you said, that almost, and I didn't know whether to use the term feminist, because now it's such a complex term to use, but yes, I did feel that. And with that whole dynamic with the princess and Conan, and then making it empowering that, okay, Conan is clearly this older, way older than her, right? But she can have that attraction. It's not always that, oh, somehow a young girl's being exploited, you know, in that way. Like she has no interest in that, and then she's being exploited. Whereas in this is that she's learning about it, she's interested in it, and she can have this attraction to, someone older, and that's a part of the journey. And then Conan himself, in his own kind of personality and stuff, he is both aware of that, but he's also respectful of that in a sense. So I thought that's a nice dynamic. And then yeah, the Zulu part is like really cool to think about, and so is Bambada in a way, because it creates some interesting things, and throughout the film.
Yeah, this film also, if we think about like how it portrays different kind of civilizations and cultures, it kind of feels like all of the cultures and all the cities and everything is they are all kind of very vulgar and barbaric. Even the ones that are kind of more on a surface level, maybe a bit more sophisticated, but they are all about like political scheming and they are very narcissistic, individualistic and stuff. But so it feels like in this world, like everyone is a barbarian in a way, and everyone is vulgar in a way, and there's not much like difference between different types of people other than these kind of surface level differences on how they look and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And I wonder that this is why might we have this attraction and interest in this world as well, because at the core it speaks to a lot of the elements that we have at our core, right? We can't be helped by being pulled in about these things, and even be driven by these things somewhere deep down. So it's that when we're in this society, and society asks us to give up a certain amount of this freedom to basically be that way, uh, so we can build something hopefully better, uh, we lose that aspect. So that appeals to the aspect, that is kind of interesting to see that. And then even with Conan, it's like, okay, him being a barbarian, but him in a way, through his own faith, philosophy, spirituality system, having a code. So he's someone who has a code within this madness, but his code does not weaken him, because he's also willing to deal with the realities of the world. And which is why him entering into this universe and helping this princess is actually a really interesting combination, because he's helping teach her, even though he's seen as this kind of crude fighter guy, but he's actually teaching her something about the world she doesn't know.
And this world kind of feels a bit like Game of Thrones in the way that
Yeah.
all the characters are kind of bad people in a way, like even Conan, the heroes are still like killers and thieves
Yeah.
and stuff. So they are like good people, even though they are better than, I don't know, the snake cult king and stuff like that. But they are still like pretty horrible people and pretty like narcissistic people.
Oh yeah.
But of course, in Game of Thrones, there is the difference. Kind of, I already talked about the culture and civilizational thing, but in Game of Thrones, there is like very clear differences between like the Starks and Lannisters and
Yeah. Yeah.
etc. But here, it kind of feels like, other than the surface level things, people are the same, basically.
Yeah. You are the same, and they also have certain motivations that you don't really know. So I think even when you get into that grand vizier part, and the protecting of the horn, and again, like you said, without that backstory, you don't know what the stakes are, and what the horn means to these people, why they're protecting it. Maybe they're protecting the horn for those people's own good, and they don't understand the power of the horn, which we do see that later. But I think at each of those moments, it took away from those action sequences as well to create that height, that heightened intensity that allows you to get even more invested in, just having Akiro like and like, the mouth going opening and closing, and they're just fighting. So some of those things weren't engaging enough, but overall, still, I enjoyed the film.
And I think one positive you could mention about the fact that it doesn't really tell anything about the mythology is that then it kind of leaves more room for interpretation and your own kind of imagination. And some people might like that you can imagine what the whole world
That's true.
is like. And I've kind of been wondering, like, what is the whole Conan universe like? Is there like very different places somewhere else? Like if you like looked at the map of the universe, like in Game of Thrones, like Winterfell is completely different to whatever. Like, what is the big city in Game of Thrones? Like where Cersei is and everything. Like King's Landing. Yeah, so they are very different places. So I wonder in this universe, like if we got like a big film series, like how the whole universe is like. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. And even having this conversation, I'm already reassessing my rating of it, because now I'm starting to see that, there are like many things that actually I did like and enjoy about the film. And that's interesting. And like you said, I did feel that as well, that, okay, more backstory would be good, but is it that now we are too used to having that backstory and not having to kind of try to imagine it for ourselves? So there's something to be said to what you're saying, that, okay, then you get to kind of think, what was it all about? You start wrestling with it. What was it all about? Why were those guys, doing that with the horn? Why is so, that in that way, that's much more engaging. And related to that, what I had just a fun, like, kind of thought experiment, because as we were talking, I realized when you're talking about Conan's world, his world is interesting because he's a wanderer, right? He's like going around, and we can imagine, okay, this wizard that seems very Eastern, right? Even if you can say stereotypical, but very Eastern, Asian, kind of that kind of wizardry. And then so you can think of Conan as, like you said, going through all these different lands that we know, even through the Silk Route and all that, and coming across all these different worlds and people. So what is his world? His world is one world that encompasses all these worlds, because he's a wanderer. And that actually made me think that them going to immediately teasing at the end of him having his kingdom, and that's kind of like the next adventure, I feel like maybe that is what sort of killed it a bit too, because the fun is in watching him wander and keep like dreaming of this kingdom that he's supposedly supposed to have. But that constantly being thwarted is what would make it engaging, because that's what would keep him wandering and entering into all these different worlds and being Conan in those worlds, and somehow impacting those worlds by being in them.
yeah, but maybe he manages to be a wanderer even after becoming a king. So
So that, like you said, like that would be another interesting thing, maybe, is that he does get his kingdom, and then it doesn't, something happens, or it doesn't turn out to be what what he wants or whatever, and then he goes out wandering again. That would be also very interesting uh, kind of journey to see. But you're right, I wish there was more. Like,
yeah.
I wish there was more.
Yeah, just have to read the comics. Like there are so many of them, and I was looking like they've been coming out for decades and decades, and they still are making new ones.
And it's amazing that it started with very early 1900s, right? 1920s, 1930s is when
30s,
the
I
comic,
think. Yeah.
which like blew my mind a bit. I was like, oh wow, like I didn't think of something like that kind of existing in like the 30s, uh, which is kind of fun to think about, like what was going on in the 30s in the US, and then this comic getting developed, and like, young boys and stuff like reading that. I think that's really cool to think about.
And it has gone through many different publishers, even Marvel at one point. So,
Yeah.
like I was looking at like the 70s ones looked like really interesting. So if I ever get into them, I might start with those.
Yeah.
And they are still in print as well, so there are like omnibus versions and everything. So.
Yeah, it's definitely made me curious. And I think Arnold, I mean, he's like the perfect Conan. I think like it's just at that time too, it was like earlier in his film career. So I think he was still doing his bodybuilding, or he was just coming off of that. So he was a lot bigger too at that time,
Mm.
right? He was obviously still was muscular even after that, but I think at that time he was still at the height of his Mr. Olympia stuff. So it's like his physicality. I'm like, you're not gonna match that. And Arnold being someone who genetically and then even in his mindset was that I'm going to create this very aesthetic, uh, body. It was not just about being big, but proportions and all that. So his physicality, it's like it's just such a perfect Conan, like that he just owns that character, and he just works so well. He worked so well as Conan. It's just this match made in him. It's almost like he existed so the film could exist.
Yeah, I don't think any of the other action heroes of this time would have fit the role as well. Like imagining Stallone with that hair, or
Yeah,
Dolph Lundgren. No, not really.
and Arnold himself had a bit of Conan in him. Like when you read like Diary of a Bodybuilder, or you watch Pumping Iron and all this stuff, he had that. Oh yeah, you should be in the woods, and real men drink beer, and eat a whole chicken. Like he had that. I think it matches some of his sensibilities, which he still tends to reflect a bit. So I think he believes in Conan. You could see that, like he thinks Conan is right to a certain extent. So that added to the convincing aspect of it as well.
Maybe we'll start wrapping this up. This was probably our shortest discussion in a while, but I mean, it's still longer than I thought it would be.
Yeah. I really like the set design too. I guess I didn't get a chance to mention it. I do really. I was really in awe by the set design. I was like, okay, this is really cool how they're doing it, because I don't know anything about it. So they did location shooting and then they built these sets, because some of them were. I was like, wow, like that's quite a set they've built.
Yeah, the cinematography is really good. So
Yeah. And do you know where they shot some of these things?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. I
And
was
one,
just wondering, yeah, if it's like in UK or all that, because they have some really nice locations that they've gone and shot in, so that adds to the film for sure, and the set design is really cool too.
thing to mention about kind of the visual aspect of the film, that they wanted to kind of tone down the violence in this one, so there's not as much blood and stuff like as there
Mm.
was in the first one. So even though there's lots of action here, but it's not quite as violent or as bloody as in the first.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I'll Google the location very quickly. Like
Yeah, yeah, the first one was way more
Mexico
graphic.
City. Yeah, it was shot in Mexico City.
Oh wow. I mean, looks now, the locations look like awesome.
Yeah, I guess that kind of area fits quite well to this type of story, as it has
Yeah,
kind of, I guess, like probably maybe some influence from like Native American stuff as well, things like that.
yeah. It's really stunning locations, really nice like locations that really fit the story and stuff, for sure. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, but anyway, it was like a somewhat of a fun movie, even though again I didn't really feel anything when I watched it. But this was used to be one of my favorite movies of all time when I
Oh,
was
okay.
kid. Yeah, I bought
I
the
can see that.
DVD from Stockholm, and then when I got home, I watched it immediately, and then I loved it, and then the next day I watched it again. So yeah, because I've always been into this kind of sword and sorcery type of stories a lot.
Yeah, I'm I didn't watch a lot of sword and sorcery stuff growing up, so I don't know much of it. I haven't seen much of it, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the adventure, and like you said, I could see the Arthurian legend aspect of it. So I do like that kind of thing as well. So I think overall, yeah, I like it. I think these are interesting worlds, and I would be interested to see more sword and sorcery things. But as a just a note on this Blu-ray, I think the only sad part about this Blu-ray is that dark scenes, the way they have done the transfer, when it's the dark scenes, you can't see anything almost. They just haven't done a very good job with transferring where the night scenes very well. So in that, I was like a bit like, if you have 4K, at least you have more differentiation in dark scenes. So that would have been cool. But overall, the day stuff looks great on this Blu-ray, no issue.
But yeah, we will do the Red Sonja at some point to return to similar type of world, and maybe the remake like a couple of years down the line if we still do the podcast. And I will probably, maybe I'll talk about the Conan comics in the future, but probably not in the near future, but maybe at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let us know what you think about Conan the Destroyer, and definitely let us know if you have read any of the books or comics, and I mean, there've been video games and everything. I played one video game like a long time ago. It was fun, but yeah, there's so much kind of Conan related things out there for people to enjoy. And yeah, thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.